What's up, everybody? It's me, Johnny. I am here in Perth for UFC 305. The card has just wrapped up. I've gotten back from the stadium, and I want to talk about it all. I want to talk about the fights from start to finish, especially including, of course, that main event between Dricus Du Plessis and Israel Adesanya for the middleweight title. I also want to talk about my experiences being here as part of the festivities, getting to go behind the scenes, interviewing fighters, being part of the press conferences, and asking questions. I will also explain what that interaction was about between me and Israel, where he said, "I think I know you." So I'll explain all of that in that section. But of course, let's talk about the fights. Let's talk about Israel Adesanya losing to Dricus Du Plessis in the fourth round via submission, rear naked choke. Now, I will say this. I thought Israel looked really good. The time off that he took, the 11 months or so, I thought was well worth it. Not only did he physically look good, like he packed on muscle clearly, but I thought in the actual octagon, he was looking pretty slick, man. Like his combos, his counterpunching, he was working Dricus's body really nicely, which was necessary because Dricus was keeping such a high guard. So if he couldn't split the guard down the middle, which he did at times, he was working the body and he was making Dricus think twice about where to put his hands and where to put his guard. So I thought he was doing really, really well until he got hit, right? And that, of course, came in the fourth round. From memory, Dricus kind of hit him in the temple. It caused Izzy to go back a little bit. That allowed him to do the takedown, and eventually it led into the rear naked choke for the submission win. Dricus is a dog, man. We've talked about this so many bloody times. He looks awkward. Yes, he looks awkward. Sometimes the way he throws kicks and the way he throws his strikes, it looks a little bit awkward, and he's constantly switching stances, but that's why he's so bloody effective. It feels like people can't figure him out, and he has such an advantage when it comes to the ability of being so strong and being able to take fighters down. How often do we see Israel Adesanya be taken down? Not that often. He's very hard to take down, and he's very hard to keep down. But not only did Dricus do it on numerous occasions throughout the fight, he actually gets him to the position where he submits Izzy. Insane. Izzy has never been submitted before. Never been submitted, and Dricus was the one to do it. Dricus was my pick. He was Rob's pick as well. I admittedly thought this was going the distance and to decision. Maybe, thankfully, he didn't go to decision because some of those judges in there, man, were crazy, and we'll talk about that when we get to the Tai Tuivasa decision and fight and whatever the hell happened there. But he manages to get it done without a shadow of a doubt. There's no controversy like there was with Sean Strickland. He is your middleweight champion. He successfully defends the title. And I vehemently believe now we need to give Dricus the respect that he deserves. He is that good. He's beaten Rob. He's beaten Sean Strickland. He's beaten Israel Adesanya. That's insane, man. Like, you're talking about three former middleweight champions. Dricus is that guy. He is really bloody good. And who is he going to fight next is the big question. Now, I uploaded the clip to the YouTube channel. Of course, Dana White said that Sean Strickland, he's ranked 1, he deserves it. But he kind of left the window open a little bit when he said, you never know what might happen. It was words to that effect. You never know what might happen as we head to, from 2024 to 2025. I think if you listen carefully to what he really said, he left the door open, but of course, leaning much more towards Sean Strickland, right? So, as part of the press conference, one of the first questions asked to Dricus when he attended it was, what did you think of that? And Dricus, like he said in the octagon, he said, I don't care. I don't care who I verse, if it's Sean, if it's me moving up, it's whatever the fans want, it's whatever the UFC wants. And if that happens to be Sean Strickland, then it will be Sean Strickland. I just want to be a great middleweight champion. That's pretty much what he said. But that's not the answer that I wanted. Like, I wanted him to really comment on who I believed and who he believed, was most deserving of the middleweight shot next, right? Not that who he thought was going to get it next and who he will be fighting next and who he wanted to fight next. I wanted to know who he thought was more deserving. So I asked that. And before I could even finish my question, he jumped in there and said Rob Whittaker. Rob Whittaker, he believes, is the most deserving of a title shot because he believes anyways, and I believe this too, of course, he believes that he beat Paulo Costa in a better, more exciting fashion than Sean Strickland did, and then he accepts the Khamzat fight, Khamzat pulls out, he still fights and he makes Ikram Aliskerov look like an amateur. That is exactly what Dricus said, and because of that, he believes that he should be getting the title shot, right? He didn't comment on whether he believed that Khamzat should get the title shot if he happens to beat Rob, hypothetically, but his answer was vehemently Rob Whittaker is the most deserving. So that was the answer that I was hoping to get, which is why I asked the question like I did. And I'm glad that he answered it in that fashion. So, look, Dricus, he's a stand-up dude. Like, he's a really nice guy. I happened to meet him in the lobby as well. And I was hoping to get an interview with him. They didn't pan out because they're busy, guys. Like, they're busy. Their schedules are packed. So, unfortunately, I couldn't. However, I did get the opportunity to ask that question in the post-fight press conference. And that's who he believes is most deserving and that should be fighting next. But in all likelihood, it might go to Sean Strickland. But let us know what you think in the comments below about that and also just about the fight in general. As for what's next for Izzy, he's not retiring. He took his gloves off, but that was because they were sore, right? That's what he said. But he's not retiring. He's not going anywhere. It's a really interesting one. He does want to stay at middleweight. So in my opinion, it would probably have to be someone like Nasruddin Imavov, probably someone like that. Like, you don't have him fight Rob for a third time if it's not for a title. In my opinion, that doesn't make sense. So it would probably have to be someone lower ranked unless Sean did fight Dricus and Dricus won again, and then they can run it back. Sean and Izzy can run it back because maybe Izzy wants to get a win over Sean. Possibly, but when do you do the Sean and Dricus fight? So I don't know. Maybe Israel has to fight a little bit further down the rankings, but that's who I see as potential opponents because Israel has fought and beaten so many people in that middleweight division. So it's a very tricky one. It's a hard one for him. Now, I think Alex Pereira did say that he might want to go down to middleweight. I don't want to see that. Like, let the middleweights fight middleweights. Let the light heavies fight the light heavies. Alex has work to do at light heavyweight, right? Like, I don't know how he's fighting Khalil Roundtree, but he is. Magomed Ankalaev is there. There are people in line that need to be dealt with before he even thinks about going down to middleweight. And what about all those talks about going up to bloody heavyweight? That should be what you do. Become the very first 3-division champion, in my opinion. Anyway, so that was the main event. And personally, I was very happy for Dricus. As I said, he's a very stand-up guy. And I thought he would get it done. He did get it done in pretty remarkable fashion. So let's go to the co-main. Man, this made me so sad. Steve Erceg gets knocked out by Kai Kara France. You have to give all credit to Kai. Kai looked so good. Like, he's never lived up more to his nickname of Don't Blink. He looked so bloody impressive. His entries in towards Steve were so scary, so impressive. Now, initially, Steve, his head movement was really good. But then Kai, if you kept doing that, we know what kind of knockout power that he has. Sometimes he worked the body. Sometimes he was going up high. He was keeping Steve thinking. And then he happened just to catch Steve, and he caught him so hard. Steve tried to get back up, but he just couldn't. Kai Kara France finishes the fight. I'm really happy for Kai because he is a Kiwi. We have a close connection with New Zealand. I'm personally very, very happy for him. And you know what? Given the bloody title opportunity. I think Amir Abazi is still injured. And of course, he had a split decision loss to Amir. So some would argue, and I would understand the argument that Amir is probably ahead of him, or maybe they should run it back. But just give it to Kai. Give it to Kai. I know it doesn't make sense. Like, he's just won one once and he lost the previous two. But I still think that would be a fun fight. Kai versus Pantoja. What will probably happen, Amir has to be part of the conversation. I'm very well aware of that. But I'm happy for Kai, but I'm just so gutted for Steve Erceg, man. He looked so good. Like, in an alternate reality, Steve doesn't do that takedown in the 5th round against Pantoja and he's your champion. Like, that's what could have been. And now, like, there's no, like, he lost to someone like Kai. Kai, we know how good he is. So I think Steve will be back. I still believe that this dude can be a champion one day. I really do believe that. But he's just got to go away, take some time off. You know, he fought a very hard fight against Pantoja. He's now been knocked out by Kai. He needs to take some time, rest up, and see what's next for him in the division. But I was gutted, bro. I did not want to see Steve lose, at least in that fashion. If it was a hard back and forth fight and he happened to lose, fine. But to see him get knocked out like that, it really hurt me deep inside. So, unfortunately. But let's talk about this banger. Mateusz Gamrot against Dan Hooker. This was a war, brother. This was a war. All credit to Gamrot. Heading into this fight, Gamrot was like, I know I need to be an exciting fighter. The only way that I'm going to get a title opportunity, similar, kind of like he was in a very similar situation as Bilal, but he said he knew that he needed to have an exciting fight if he was going to get the title opportunity. And if he happened to beat Dan, especially in an exciting fashion, he was probably next up after, of course, Arman Sarukian, whenever him and Islam do happen to fight. So he knew that, and he was clearly more willing to stand there and trade and bang with Dan Hooker. We've seen previous fights of Gamrot where he is wrestling and grappling for a lot of it, and a lot of people don't like his fight style because of that. And even though there was a bit of that, of course, in this fight, especially the first round, he was still there willing to trade with Dan, and it made it such a great, exciting fight. So I thought it was a fun fight. I agree that they got the bonus, both of them. So that was awesome. But obviously, there has been a bit of controversy as to who happened to win this fight. Now, if you were to ask my opinion, round one, I thought went to Gamrot. Yes, I think there were moments in there where Dan did sit Gamrot down, but I thought that first round, absolutely Gamrot won. Like, he was wrestling him. He was kind of mauling him at times. So I thought round one to Gamrot. Round two was very, very bloody close. But I thought those elbows in particular at the end of the second round were a lot more damaging, and they were the most damaging strikes in that round. So I would have given that second round to Dan Hooker. And then the third round, I thought, again, that was pretty close, but I would have given the slight edge to Dan Hooker. And if you look at the significant strikes overall, over the whole course of the fight, I believe Dan had one more. It was that close. But when you look at the impact and the damage and the cleanliness of the strikes, if you will, I thought Dan just cinched that one. But it was a split decision. It was very, very close. One gave it to Mateusz Gamrot, two gave it to Dan Hooker. So I thought it was the right call, but understandably it was very close. So Gamrot's not going anywhere, right? He was given a bonus for fight of the night. He'll be back there. He'll still be ranked, probably make like 6th or 7th. If they shoot Dan right up, I think Dan's 11. If they shoot Dan from 11 or wherever he is to 5, that only puts him down to 6 or 7. So I think Gamrot's going to be fine. He probably, maybe at this rate, he never fights for a title, unfortunately. Like, you've got too many killers in that division. You've, of course, Dan Hooker just beating him. You still have Oliveira there. You still have Gaethje there. And a lot of those fighters are coming off losses. But Dan Hooker, I think, I wouldn't put him into a title opportunity straight away. I would like to see him get one more win. I think that would be really good. But he looked impressive, man. And what I was most impressed with Dan is that he defended those takedowns like a boss, man. Defensively, he has improved so bloody much. And of course, we know how good he is with his striking. So incredible fight, fun fight. I agree with Dan Hooker winning, but I understand if you believe that Gamrot won, especially with his control and everything. But I just thought Dan Hooker did a little bit more. So let's talk about Tai Tuivasa against Jairzinho Rozenstruik. This one hurt me as well because as an Aussie, I wanted to see Tai win. I thought he could get the job done, but Jairzinho outclassed him. For the whole fight, all 3 rounds, his kickboxing was too much. Tai never really could develop offense. The times where Tai was doing good is where he managed to get Jairzinho up against the cage and was just outworking him and boxing him. But there wasn't, you look at all 3 rounds, there wasn't too much offense from Tai. Jairzinho, in my opinion, was controlling him from start to finish. Again, his kickboxing was on point. Very, very technical striker, and we saw that in that fight. And then we get that random judge. I can't remember his name. I think he was a Kiwi judge and not an Australian judge. But that random judge gave the fight to Tai 30-27. This ended up being a split decision win to Jairzinho. So the right person won, but that one judge gave all 3 rounds to Tai. It made no sense. No sense whatsoever. Like, what the hell are we doing here? All 3 rounds to Tai. Maybe 1. I wouldn't even give 1. Maybe 1. But all 3, that judge was actually retired for the rest of the card. Like, I think the commission said, you're not judging any more fights. He was set to be in there for the co-main. And even if he was, it wouldn't have made a difference. But he was retired. He was like fired for the whole card because that was such a poor decision from him. Terrible. Should never judge again. That was the worst call that I've ever seen. I feel bad for Tai. I wanted Tai to win. But Jairzinho gets it done. And can I say this? I did that interview with Jairzinho. I just happened to bump into him in the lobby and he agreed to it. He is like one of the nicest guys you will ever meet. He's a gentle giant. He was so kind to me. His camp, his family were so kind to me. They were telling me about the history of Suriname and where they get the name Biggie Boy and why it's spelt in that particular way with the I instead of a Y. The nicest group of people and the nicest fighter that you could possibly ever meet. They were so nice. Even the interview, they had the flag of Suriname in the middle, and they were the best. I'm personally, even though I'm sad for Tai, I'm still very happy for Jairzinho. And I hope he does go on to fight Tybura and Spivak. He was booked to fight both of those fighters at some stage. And I think that will be a great fight. I would like to see Jairzinho keep going. He's now 2 on the trot now after beating Gaziev, Shamil after that TKO retirement victory. So now that he's beaten Tai, keep moving up. Get him back into the top 10. Get him back into the top 5. I thought he did great. So really impressive performance from Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Jingliang against Carlos Prates. Carlos Prates, good Lord, he's a problem. That dude is a menace. His striking is so clean. His combos are insane. And I asked him as well in the post-fight press conference, like the way that he fights, he'll get 1, 2, 3, really good combos in or really good shots in. Clearly, that was hurting Jingliang because he sat him down a number of times, but he never just jumped onto it. And when I asked him the question, he was explaining he doesn't like to do that. He knew that, of course, that he was dropping Jingliang, but he likes the fighter to get back up, and then he'll do it again, and get back up and do it again. That's his preference. And it worked. It bloody worked. He ended up knocking out Jingliang cold. I feel bad for Jingliang. It was nice to see him back. He looked good. Like physically, he looked good. He looked very happy. And he's obviously a fan favorite. But Carlos Prates just destroyed him. Absolutely destroyed him. This dude's going to be a menace. He's going to be a menace in the division. That is for sure. So very impressive win. I think he got a performance bonus as well. So really impressive win from Carlos Prates. Junior Tafa against Walter Walker. Another controversial moment, the verbal submission, right? So it was towards the end of the first round, right? And he had him in a knee bar or a heel hook, something like that. I can't remember because there was an interview happening at the exact same time. So the sound wasn't on in the media center. So we were watching I can't even think right now, like the repeat angles and seeing what was happening. And then we heard, essentially Justin Tafa screamed when he was in the submission. It was in the last 3 seconds of the round, but he didn't tap and he didn't say tap. So he screamed. And because of the scream, the ref called it and said it was a submission victory, a technical submission victory to Walter Walker. Now, I initially was like, what the hell? He didn't tap. But remember, because we're doing that interview and the sound, because when they do the interview, they bring the fighters in. Doesn't matter if fights are still going on. They bring the fighters in. They turn the volume down for the stream, for the fights that are taking place, so we can still see the fights. So they turn the volume down as we do the interview. So I'm like looking at the fighter. I think it was Jack Jenkins that was being interviewed, and I'm like in my corner of my eye, seeing what's going on, and I couldn't hear what was happening with Justin Tafa. So I was like, why the hell was the fight called? He didn't even tap. What the hell happened? But then they put the volume back on as Jack left, and then you could hear that scream. If I was the ref in that situation and I heard that scream, yeah, you'd probably call it. And apparently they are told if you scream like that, it will be called in favor of the other guy. It will be called a technical submission. Don't scream like that, because if it's screaming like you're in pain and that your knee's about to pop or whatever, you're about to get a dislocated elbow or whatever other kind of submission that it is, don't scream like that, because the fight will be called, right? You don't need to tap for that kind of result to happen. So after that, after reading the rule and listening to everyone's opinions, I can understand why the fight was called. But after that, Tafa was not happy, man. He was like walking up, giving him trash. Like he slapped him. It was a light slap, but he slapped Walter Walker at some stage. Walker was heated, brother. He came into the post-fight press conference interview, and he was pissed off. Apparently, Tafa's brother, Justin Tafa, was giving him lip. So it was just crazy, man. He was like, I'll fight them both right now. And the coach was in the back, was like, tomorrow, you'll fight him tomorrow. It was insane. They were both heated. And Tafa just kept flipping him off as the fight was being called and Walter Walker's hand was being raised. That was insane. So after all that, I agree with the decision, but it was just a weird way for it to end. And Tafa, I love him, but yeah, maybe he shouldn't have acted like that afterwards. Be frustrated for sure, but he kind of took it a little bit too far. So next up, we've got Josh Culibao against Ricardo Ramos. Josh, man, why did you do this, bro? He could have won it. And then he just let it go on the third. I thought he still won. to be fair, I thought he still won, but he left it so bloody close in the third round. And you were like, this happens all the time. If you leave a round too close, it can go either way. And you got nobody but yourself to blame when you perform like that in the third round. And I didn't actually think when he did like the Battle Arena 12, I didn't think that was bad. He was having a little bit of fun, right? But it was his performance in the third round which really cost him. And he left it up to chance. And chance dictated in this situation that you didn't win the fight. So I still thought he won, but he happened to lose because of that. So Ricardo Ramos did win in the end. Casey O'Neill against Luana Santos, not much to say here. Casey O'Neill, beat her cleanly in all 3 rounds. Jack Jenkins against Herbert Burns. This guy's going to be a problem too. He's looking really good after coming back from his injury. He hits like a truck. I don't know if they were amplifying the hits of the fighters in this particular card, but when Jack Jenkins was getting those body shots in and when he was boxing him, they sounded like they hurt like a mother. It just sounded so painful, so brutal. So first round obviously goes to Jack, second round to Jack, and then the third round, he hit Burns so bloody hard that Burns didn't even want to get up. He kept laying on his bloody back that whole fight, and it was pissing me off. It was really pissing me off. And then Jack kept trying to get him up, and there were times where he thought about going in, and then it was like, no, you got to stand up, because Jack was destroying him with his hands with the stand up, absolutely dominating him. And every time that he sat Burns' ass down, Burns would just lie there and say, I don't want to get back up. So he had to get back up. He was stood up by the ref by like 5 times or 6 times. And then by that time in the third round, it's like, nah, you're done. You're done. If you don't want to stand up, you clearly don't want to fight. Jack wins. Jack destroyed him. He freaking destroyed him, and I'm so happy for him. Fellow Aussie, it was really nice to see him get the win. Tom Nolan against Alex Reyes. Tom Nolan looked really good. He's very tall for that division, bro. Very tall, long reach, and he used that to his advantage. Beats Alex Reyes. Song Kenon against Ricky Glenn. Song Kenon, The fight looked like it was like in a bit of slow motion, but Song was clearly like destroying him, clearly the harder puncher. He gets it done. And then Stuart Nicol against Jesus Aguilar. I feel bad for Stewie. It was his UFC debut. Again, another Aussie, but he got choked out. And he got choked out really badly when he got into that guillotine. I thought maybe there was a chance of him getting out of it, but he was there for a little bit too long. And I'm like, all right, he's out, he's done. And his head flopped. His eyes are in the back of his head. Even Jesus, and to his credit, what a good dude, was lifting his legs to get blood back to the head so he would wake up quicker. But that was a pretty vicious submission from Jesus Aguilar. So I feel bad for Stewie Nicol, but hopefully he is back. He signed, I believe, a couple of fights with the UFC, so they're not going to cut him straight away after that. But that was UFC 305. That was my breakdown. Again, we'll do the breakdown with Rob. But yeah, so this weekend, being part of the festivities, as I said, and the press conferences and everything was fun. So let me kind of explain what happened. The first day was the media day, right? And they bring the fighters in, media day, you can ask questions and everything, right? And the kind of thing with these media days and the press conferences is that other journalists have the priority. They'll always ask the one like questions first. So, and you recognize them. You know the journalists. You hear their voices. They're usually the ones that go first. So by the time that someone like myself gets the opportunity to ask a question, oftentimes everything has been asked, right? So when it came to the Israel Adesanya one, right? What happened is that in the middle of it, I got told that, Steve Erceg can do the interview with you, but he has to do it in the middle of the media day. So I was like, crap, preparing questions, because I didn't know that I was going to interview him that soon. I thought it might have been later that day and I could prepare the questions later. But they were like, no, he can only do it at this time after his press conference. So while Israel was there, I'm like trying to prepare questions and listening to what's already been asked. And then I asked a question, which was not the same, but similar to a question that was asked before about what he thought about Sean Strickland getting the title opportunity next. And that's why Israel was like, you're not listening. That was already asked, right? So that happened there. And I was like, all right, that was on me. I wasn't listening, right? If it wasn't the same question, again, it was similar, but that was on me. So that's what happened there. And then as part of the main press conference, right? Again, we get the opportunity to ask questions. I wanted to go into a hole and die, right? I felt so cut up, so bad. I was called out by Israel. My first day, my first media session, my first UFC thing ever. I just wanted to crawl into a hole and not do anything. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to get up. I'm going to try and prepare some good questions for the press conference. I want to ask a question. Actually, you know what? Like initially they were like, hey, who wants to ask questions? And I didn't want to. I wasn't going to say yes. And then it was only one person on the right-hand side, because on the left-hand side, people are asking questions. On the right-hand side, people could ask questions. And there was only one other person. I thought, all right, you know what? I'll just ask a question. Whatever happens, happens. And I'm a firm believer that things happen for a reason. So I was like, all right, I'm going to ask a question. And I happened to ask the question about betting odds and how the betting odds had shortened significantly as we were heading into the fight. Never did I say that Izzy was the underdog. Never did I say that Dricus was now the favorite. I said that the odds have shortened. And what did Dricus think about that? Because on some betting sites, I believe it was a pick'em at that stage. So no clear favorite, no clear underdog. I never used the word dog once. I never did, right? So Dricus gave his answer. And then I saw Izzy, he wanted to respond. I was like, oh, Izzy, do you have a response? And then Izzy asked me, when did I become the underdog? And then that's when Dricus jumped in and said, no one said anything about dogs, bro. That's how that whole thing happened. So this was like me trying to ask a professional, interesting question that hadn't been asked before, because it hadn't. No one talked about the betting odds yet. And it was a bit of a talking point online. That's all it was from me. I genuinely, hand on my heart, was not trying to bring out the word underdog or dog in the responses. I swear, I genuinely did not mean it like that, right? It was that whole thing that was all Dricus jumping in when he heard Izzy say underdog, right? And then that's when Izzy was like, well, am I the underdog? I said, no, it's a pick'em. You're still technically the favorite. And then that's when he was like, well, what do I do? How do I make money from this? And I said, well, you bet on yourself like you always have, right? And then it's like, yeah, you have to. By the way, I recognize you. He recognized me from the earlier media day where I asked the question that was similar, and he kind of called me out for it. So I see this as the world coming back around, right? Everything happens for a reason. If I didn't have that interaction with Izzy on the media day, which was embarrassing, and I felt like crap for it because it was on me, I wasn't listening properly, and I was preparing for the other interview. If that didn't happen, that moment doesn't happen, because I probably don't ask that kind of question, because it's everything in context. What happened with the previous day, I really wanted to ask a good question. Everything happens for a reason. So at the end of that day, I was feeling pretty good. And I thought, you know what? I helped make one of the more viral moments of that press conference. That was a lot of fun. And then today, as part of the post-fight presser, when Izzy actually had a post-fight presser, I didn't ask any questions. I didn't want to rock that boat. I had my moment. And then Dricus came in. And then Dricus was asked the question about, hey, Sean Strickland, who do you want to fight? And he was like, I'll fight anyone, whoever the fans want, whoever the UFC wants. But again, I wanted to get that answer of who he believed was more deserving. So I asked that question, and he jumped in straight away and said Rob Whittaker. So those are my 2 or 3 big highlights from the weekend. I didn't mean to go in and cause all this stuff, but it happened. It was fun. Everything happened for a reason, and I had an absolute blast. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And until next time, this has been Johnny. Please take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next episode of the podcast.